Think that's it, Chai? Okay, we'll call to order. Roll call, please.
Sand City. Here. Seaside.
Here.
Veranda.
Here.
Delray Oaks. Here. Salinas.
Here.
County of Monterey.
Here.
Pacific Grove.
Here.
Castroville.
Here.
Monterey.
Here.
Marina Coast.
Here. We move on to agenda item 3, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. And if I could ask Director Shirley if she might lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Director Shirley. We move on to agenda item 4, additions to the agenda. Are there any additions, staff?
Oh, no, sorry.
No additions, directors? All right, seeing none, we'll go to agenda item 5, approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Thank you very much. We have a motion by Vice Chair Williamson, and I'm sorry, who seconded? Was it?
I did.
Thank you very much.
It was all
Thank you very much. Any comment from the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back on a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Please show unanimous. We move to agenda item 6, public comments on closed session items. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters appearing on the closed session may do so at this time. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes. And if you are out there on Zoom, please raise your Zoom hand if you wish to comment on the closed session. We will have general public comment after we exit closed session. All right, seeing none, we're going to go into closed session, conference with labor negotiators under Government Code Section 54957.6. The unrepresented employee is the general manager. Thank you very much, members of the public, for stepping out of the room.
And then Chair Moore, for those.
We certainly hope we can make it by 6:15, but one never knows how closed sessions go. So we're good?
Good.
Okey doke. So we are out of agenda item 7, closed session. We're now on agenda item 8, and there are no announcements to be made from closed session. So we go to public comments, which is agenda item 9. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters not appearing on the agenda may do so now for not more than 3 minutes. Comments, of course, on other matters listed on the agenda will be welcome at the time those matters are considered by the board. Anyone wishing to make public comment? Seeing none in the room. And if you are out on Zoom, raise your Zoom hand. And seeing none there, we will then move on to the consent agenda. Do any directors wish to pull any items from consent? Anyone from the public wishing to pull anything from consent? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval of consent.
Is there a second?
Second, I guess.
Thank you very much. We have a motion by Director Smith, seconded by Director Garcia Arzola. And we go to the public for comment. Seeing none, we'll take a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Please show unanimous approval. We get to committee reports. Agenda item 11A is Budget and Personnel Committee, which was canceled. So obviously no report to accept. We'll get to agenda item 11B, Recycled Water Committee. Any questions or comments on the draft minutes? Anyone wish to make a motion to receive the draft minutes?
So moved, Your Honor.
Is there a second? Thank you very much. We have a motion again by Director Smith, seconded by Director Carbone. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on the motion? Seeing none in the room and none on Zoom, on a voice vote, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Once again, unanimous approval. Thank you very much. We move to agenda item 12A. Consider receiving the final water recycling agreement expense audit. Staff, please, your report.
Thank you, Chair Moore. So as you all know, we've been working with the Water Resources Agency on an audit of the recycled water or the reclaimed water funds for SVRP, CSIP, and SRDF. That audit has come out and was finalized by the auditing firm GPP. What is GPP's full name?
Analytics.
Analytics? Okay, thank you. A presentation was done in front of the Board of Supervisors, August 13th. Another one was done in front of the Water Resources Agency Board last Monday. And so this is just an opportunity to present the information to this board. Ara Azarian, the general manager at the Water Resources Agency, is with us. Actually, the Board of Supervisors, we sort of did a tag team and both spoke to the issue. So also for clarity, the Board of Supervisors and the Water Resources Agency presentation, the auditor, Julian Metcalf, did present his findings. So we're doing a little modified version of it. We'll be presenting the findings ourselves. We also have a statement of, where we have some disagreement or where we're working on things. I was going to invite Ara up to either there or you can sit next to me so we can sort of go back and forth. Oh, or Tammy's. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Ara. So, Shai, can we put the presentation up, please? So I think you're all aware of this. This is an audit that been transpired since August of last year. We met with GPP and staff at the Water Resources Agency and kicked it off. So this is just sort of a timeline of what we went through. Although we kicked it off in August, the auditor primarily worked with the finance staff at Water Resources Agency, and our finance staff to get all the information. The auditor did sit in-house for a few days trying to gather information. First time we saw anything in terms of output was May 5th of this year. And that's, as noted on here, draft submission to our staff. We were able to review it, provide some comments. There were some modifications. It became apparent that through the process, and I would love Ara to provide color commentary if we're doing a football game, on some of the details of this. So it became apparent that we gave information to the auditor, but from the auditor's perspective, we may not have been timely or as professional as we should have been. So that as a backdrop, I'm not sure if that's consistent what you have heard from the auditor and or your staff, but we did work through it and we were able to get more information. And actually, Rachel Godoyan and Steve Kerrigan, we brought them in to help out, drilling down into much of the details of providing additional information. You have anything else on that?
Yeah, I would just simply say that the March 5th draft was the result of the information that, had been provided to date. And, because of the time that followed that, more information was provided and the audit did change as a result. So.
Yeah. So additional information was provided and it did change from that March 5th date to the next draft that we saw in June. So with that, the audit had a total of 7 findings. Of the findings, 4 of them were actual findings of, hey, you guys need to do something different. 3 of them were sort of summation findings. They were just repeated information from the other findings. Perspective on an audit, very much like, in my opinion at least, very much like a legal opinion. It's an opinion. It's an opinion based on the information they have. So what we're going to go through here is some differences that we, Monterey One Water, feel should be included in the evaluation of the audit. So for instance, if we both agree on the formula, yet I use different inputs than ours use, and we're going to have a different outcome. Doesn't mean his is correct or mine's correct or his is gospel or not. It's a difference in opinion. So I'm also going to get into what we've been doing and what board chair and vice chair have been doing and trying to meet to come to a resolution of some of these discrepancies. Any thoughts on that? Or you want to jump into the findings?
Jump on in.
Let's get to the findings. Thank you. So I'm going to paraphrase because there's lots of words up there. And I think most of you know that with PowerPoints, I like pictures, not lots of words. Biggest thing was our indirect charges. So when we bill the Water Resources Agency, people that work on a pump or operate valves, they code their time, and those are direct charges. Indirect are all those charges like a percentage of myself, or maybe accounting or HR, or things that can't be captured with a direct nexus to an asset. The finding here is over the 4-year period of the audit, GPP claims that Water Resources was overcharged to the tune of about $1.1 million over those 4 years. This all has to do with a methodology that is used. In our agreement from 2015, there's an Exhibit J that states a draft formula that should have been used. For the last 6 years or so, 6 years or so, that formula was not used. A different formula was used. It's not saying that one was incorrect, but I think something we did that we shouldn't have is we just started using it. We should have said, hey, Water Resources, we'd like to use this different formula. Just as valid, but not what was specified in the agreement. Now, the agreement isn't entirely clear, and that's another thing that R and I get to spend a lot of time working on, but the agreement says you can use Exhibit J, which is marked draft, or you can use something else, but you just need to pass it by each other. So what we did is we used something else. We just didn't ask them first. You'll note that it was used for 6 years. So I know I caught some heat from the Board of Supervisors on that, saying, hey, we used it, but no one said anything. That's not saying we shouldn't have asked. All it's saying is that's what happened. So when I said there's a formula and we can have different inputs, this is probably the biggest thing for us, is to understand what inputs were used to that formula by the auditor and were they appropriate. So I know we've talked about getting the auditor's working papers or his spreadsheet on what he did. And we just want to compare it to what we feel is correct. And there's certain low-hanging fruit that I'll give examples of. In discussions with the auditor, he may not have included the 2 full-time staff we have at CSIP in his calculations of his formula. We don't know because when we see it, we'll see it. Another thing is, if you remember back to, what was that, 2018, Mike's team was under admin because it was pretty much Mike and Rachel. Well, as they grew and we started doing more legislative advocacy and going after additional grants, we carved them out and made them their own little department. So they have their own budget that is separate from admin department. In our opinion, it was like, well, it was approved before under admin, it's still part of indirect costs. The auditor said, hey, that's different. You didn't get that approved. And we're like, well, it was in my department first, and we just sort of carved it out. So there's some little discrepancies like that we're just working through. Now, I'm going to go through the rest of the findings, but I just want to say that R and I have been meeting on this frequently since February.
Since it began, really, but
Yeah.
frequently since, certainly since.
Yeah, we have been talking about it, but much more frequently. So we both know where we're at and understanding that trying to find resolution is the goal here. As I very much appreciate him inviting me to the Board of Supervisors and the Water Resources Agency, which I couldn't make, but because we are trying to work together on it. And we both understand the complexities of what we're trying to accomplish. It is not as clear cut as one would seem. So anything on finding one or?
Just sort of echoing your observation, it is unfortunate that the Exhibit J is referenced as such as it is as a draft or a sample. That said, the auditor in their work, they're really relying on the weight of the evidence, right? And so they're sitting down and they're saying, well, this is the agreement. And while the agreement may not be clear, it doesn't describe an alternative. And so this is what we need to work with here. This is what's before us. And so that's what they worked with. And so, it really comes down to their efforts to be, impartial, but also reliant on the weight of the evidence, and in their determination, the weight of the evidence led towards this conclusion as opposed to a different one. So.
Yeah. And I also know, just to add on what Ara just said, we'd like to look at our inputs, if we put them into Exhibit J and compare them to GPPs, how far off are we? And we don't know that just yet. I'm not saying that we should absolutely stick to our guns on the other formula that was used, because it's something we should have changed. And it just dawned on me that we have someone else in the audience that may be familiar with Exhibit J. Just from a history standpoint, when I first got here, indirect charges were a flat rate. And the Water Resources Agency at the time was like, hey, we should probably tighten that up. And that's how we developed Exhibit J back in like 2015-ish. So this has been an evolutionary process, particularly on these charges. But finding one, it's frankly the big gorilla in the room. It's the $1.1 million over a 4-year period that there's the alleged overcharge. So we're going to go try to get to the bottom of that. Next slide. So once again, I'm not going to read this to you. I'll give you the essence of, we have a timesheet tracking system. It's called Eden. I'm going to use a name so we can try to keep them different. Eden, we put our time in. That's how we get paid. Lucity is our computerized maintenance management system. It's our asset management system that produces work orders for widgets that our people work on. So for instance, I'm going to work on that water container, but there's not much to work on, I suppose. But if I were, I would track my time, materials used, equipment used to work on that, and it's billed. Well, I've worked in and around these agencies for many years, as has Ara. They're different systems. They're for different purposes. The auditor looked at it going, wow, the hours are substantially different between the two systems. And I was certainly like, well, yeah, that's what's going to happen. That's how these things work. It was a huge alarm to them. And I understand that when they're looking at the numbers and the evidence that they have, they're going, hey, you have these two systems. They're really different. How did you, when I say really different, it was almost an order of magnitude difference in hours over a given year. It was tremendous. So it caused concern. Now, I still feel that staff, primarily at the treatment plant, categorizing their hours to these things, did an entirely appropriate job for the tools they were using and the purposes. However, in this going back and forth with Water Resources Agency staff, and it's not just ARA, it's their finance manager and others, they're like, hey, it'd be great if you could tighten that up a bit. And we're like, okay, we'll do that. It's going to cost more money, because now if I'm just working on that, I also have to make time every day to make sure everything matches between these two disparate systems, but understand the need for it. So we've already started implementing that. Tammy out at the plant started doing this beginning of July, and it's getting better because you have a lot of years of people using the Eden for timekeeping and Lucity for CMMS, but we're trying to tie the two together. So it's better now. It'll continue to get better, and that will hopefully provide sort of a background of information that we can provide to non, where there's a nod of the head going, okay, we'll see where these are connected. Please understand that these are not designed to work this way, so it's a lot of work on staff at this point, keeping tabs on things. As you all know, we're moving through into a new ERP or a new system. Eden is going away. So we'll look for what can best be integrated. It's going to be difficult, but I know it's something that Frank has his eye on and will be part of the evaluation moving forward. You have any thoughts on that one?
You know, with this particular finding, I think the auditor does a good job of explaining that they are two disparate systems, but that the information was so discordant, they really couldn't draw a conclusion here, which is, you know, I think a fair way of describing it. And I think what was alarming to them was, you know, in one system, some people showed up and never in the other, and vice versa. And so it was those sort of, you know, facts that they were seeing that were causing the concern there. I agree with Paul, the two systems are never going to match up exactly right. You know, but we do need to have more confidence in the tracking that is occurring. And so to your point, you know, I mean, we'll work through that and, you know, there's some practices that can use some improving, and, you know, and that does come with some additional costs, but in the long term, it becomes worth it.
Can we move on to 3? Okay, so finding 3, you know, I'm going to go back for a second. On March 5th, when I first started reading this thing, I've never been associated with an audit that had findings, let alone 7 findings. So it was shocking, as you can imagine. As you drill down into it, those 7 findings, there were really 4 like, hey, you need to do some stuff, and then 3 that sort of summarized again, which we'll talk about. But even 4 findings of substance is shocking. So when we get to this one, finding 3 is we didn't comply with the monthly reporting. So I think there was over a 10-month, we're supposed to provide reports to water resources every month. And there was a 10-month period where that didn't occur. 9 of those months were outside the audit period. So at first we were like, that seems a little ticky-tacky to me, just throwing it in there even though it's out. But it's something that was missed, for God's sake. So we take full responsibility for that. 1 was within the audit period. It's been rectified. As you well know, we've had a number of changes in our finance department. And interim staffing coming in and out, and we just didn't have the resources. This is not an excuse. It's just a fact of the number of bodies we had down there. I guess I am boring the system where it just went blank. Anyhow, it's been resolved. We're doing a better job with having our bi-weekly meetings with our finance crews.
I don't know the frequency, but I know they're meeting.
Yeah. And those monthly reports are going out. Now, what we are seeing is an increase in requested information. So that's going to go to something else of, you know, we talked about our maintenance staff and operations staff. They're going to spend more time keeping tabs on things. Our accounting and finance staff, as we increase, or the requests have increased in the amount of information, there's going to be more time there as well. But I mean, this one's, I think, pretty simple. We addressed it. We will continue to address it. I don't know if you have thoughts on this one too.
You know, again, I mean, I think the auditors speak for themselves in the report. And so I think that, you know, that should be your primary source of information here. With respect to this particular finding, you know, I think their rationale here was it was an example of the ongoing challenges that the agency was facing in terms of being able to determine its position financially on an ongoing and consistent basis. And so they included it for that purpose, I believe.
Yeah. 4. Okay, so 4 is sort of a large bucket of ones. It talks about accounting practices and limited transparency, which of course is a little bit of a shock as well when you start reading things like this. They identified areas that were not compliant with the agreement, because that was the focus of the audit, is what we're doing within the agreement. And then certainly inconsistent financial reporting, questionable account balances, et cetera, et cetera. So this one was hard to get for me to look at through the lens of the auditor, because I go, well, hold it. We've had an auditor that's been around for 96 years doing our audit for the last 6 years and we've been doing great. We've received the Government Finance Officers Association awards for the last decade or more. We've received the Triple Crown Award on our financial reports, budget, and popular annual financial report for the last few years. So it's like, wow, we seem to be doing well by one measure. And yet here we have a fairly egregious statement. And so we took this very seriously. And we started scrutinizing our policies and procedures and how things happened down in our accounting and finance. People down there, they did what they're supposed to do under the confines of the resources they have. But we started looking a little deeper of like, what else can we do to make this better? Whether it be cross-training, whether it be how things are checked, the QA, QC. And we are, even before the final report came out, we started implementing a lot of these. We'll continue to do that. I mean, there will be changes moving forward. Another thing is Water Resources Agency, although it's allowed within the contract, they can do an audit whenever they'd like. This is the first one that I'm aware of, a full audit. We've done little things before. They said, hey, you know what? We're going to do a yearly audit. And that's great. That's fine. So I think a lot of, in my opinion at least, a lot of this is we needed to tighten things up, and we acknowledge that. And we are doing it, and we will continue to do it. In doing so, hopefully continue to build trust with the Water Resources Agency, who we've been partners with for 28 years or something. So when you read the audit in and of itself, does it look bad? Yeah, it absolutely does. But I think there's some nuances within it that we will continue to work on to come to resolution. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me talk one more thing. There was a misstatement of $600,000, which, you know, it's a pretty big, large number. It's like, hey, you didn't know where it went. We provided some information after that March 5th timeframe, because initially that first draft had us owing Water Resources $600,000 additional to the 1.1 million. After providing information, Rachel and Steve, the auditor backed off on that statement and didn't recommend a repayment. I think there's some of the Board of Supervisors actually that would like to understand it a little better on, it was a journal entry issue, and just having more solid evidence of the fact that the money is still there.
Yeah. So I think for the Resources Agency, finding 4 is probably the highest priority finding. The rest of the findings represent snapshots in time. Finding 4 talks about the continuity of the relationship, and the simple fact is, you know, we spend approximately $800,000 a month on Monterey One Water Services. And so seeing improvement in finding 4 is very important to us in terms of ensuring as we move forward, you know, things are done well. You know, to Paul's observation about the agency's independent annual audits versus this audit, I think perhaps that difference relates to context. In other words, your financial auditors, when they're looking at Monterey One as a whole, they're not diving into the reclamation fund specifically, and even more so, aren't then applying that analysis in the context of a different agreement, right? Your annual auditors are looking at how you all are performing your financial function in the context of the agency and your own policies and procedures. And I think, you know, that demonstrates the alignment there.
Mhm.
So that may be that disconnect. And I think with, you know, with respect to the referenced misstatement, in the end, if I recall in the audit, this is handled something like finding two, wherein the auditor ultimately says, we have conflicting records here. And so we aren't in a position to make, a determination one way or another. Just as in finding two, they don't offer an opinion whether, we were over or undercharged. And so I think that remains an issue of interest and just another one of those things that we can walk through and work through and come to some agreement about.
So yeah, as in the final audit report, this is a quote from the last sentence on this item is, as such, in our final audit report, we do not recommend at this time that M1W reimburse the monies in reference to the 600,000, and we have not calculated it as an overcharge in this report. So I think there is that caveat he throws in there at this time. So, next slide, please. So these are the summation findings that I referenced. Initially, when I first saw it, I was like, oh my God, 7. But when you look at them, finding 5 is just talking about the indirect charge overcharge of finding 1. Finding 6 is the weak controls environment, which is talking about pretty much finding 4 that Ara just referenced of being the most important. And then breaches of agreement. Well, this whole audit was titled, where's the title? Water Recycling Agreement Expenses Audit. So they just pointed out areas that they felt we didn't meet the intent of the agreement and recommended there's some things that need to be clarified that both entities should work together on amending that 2015 agreement. So those are them. Anything there? Okay. So going into what have we done so far? I mean, we had this first draft come in March. I think we talked about it a little bit in general, but we've been meeting a fair amount since then. I didn't realize this, 8 meetings to date that we've.
I was going to say it's about every other week.
Yeah. So it has been a consistent thing that we are pushing and working on. In addition, we had one meeting with both chairs of the board and the general managers, and then one more with chair, vice chair, and general managers from both entities. There's monthly meetings with the finance staff just to keep things going, as well as to try to clarify what the needs truly are on the Water Resources Agency side. And for instance, I was handed this today of the monthly requests. So we thought we were giving them something. Well, Nan certainly wants some more in terms of more details on the wages and names of people, number of hours, dates, where it's tied in the GL in the general ledger, electricity usage, and explanation of why it's high or low. So far more detail than we anticipated, but that's why they're meeting on a monthly basis, is to understand and also convey, hey, this is going to take a while, or here's where the records come from, and so on. In addition, I already mentioned the draft timekeeping procedures between Eden and Lucidity. We're going to meet again on that. It's been implemented since July 1, but we're just trying to fine tune it to make sure we have something that works for the employees, that they can do on an ongoing basis in a consistent manner, as well as meets the needs of Water Resources Agency. Is that a summary of what we've done so far? And then I'll go on to next steps. Okay. Next slide. So what are the next steps? Well, Ara and I were talking about getting the auditors' working sheets on that 1.1 million. So that's one thing. And we'll both review the working papers and then what inputs they had and what we had. Certainly continued work between us, technical staff, and so on, as well as chairs and vice chairs. And then I think it was at the Board of Supervisor meeting, they mentioned wanting updates about every 90 days. So I think we anticipate doing something to that effect. Beyond this and talking about those inputs, if you wanted a little more detail, I believe, I shouldn't say I know, I believe Peter Skinner's prepared to talk about some of those inputs and what that means, if you'd like some additional information. And do you have anything else before we go to the question thing?
Just, I guess just a general observation. I will start with just, expressing my appreciation for Monterey One Water being proactive in their response to this. They didn't wait for the report to go public. They saw the recommendations and they began acting on them immediately. And also just the willingness to sit down and recognize that there are differences here, right? And the willingness to sit down and work them out. The relationship's been long and it's important. And I put it in the context, you all talk about millions of gallons per day, I think in acre feet. And when I think about the life of this project, I mean, between the recycling of wastewater and the CSIP distribution system, we have avoided the pumping of over 250,000 acre feet in the 18400 subbasin. And when we think about what we're doing here, why are we recycling water? Why are we distributing this treated water for agricultural purposes? Of course, it's there to support and promote agriculture, but ultimately it's to protect that subbasin and the seawater intrusion that has been going on there. And so the outcomes have been magnificent. Are there things that we could be doing better? Yes, I think there's been full acknowledgement of that. Will we continue to work together to resolve these differences? Of course. And so I'm really pleased with the willingness of the chair and vice chair of both organizations to take time out of their busy lives to listen to us. And to provide guidance and help direct the technical and staff work that'll be going on along the way as well. And so I think that that's all, very important to keep in mind. So that would be my closing remark.
Okay. Peter, did you want to chime in, or only if they ask questions?
Yeah, I don't have any more. I'm not sure detail is really the order of the day at this point, but happy to field any questions that I might be able to clarify.
Okay. With that, that's all we had, and we'd love to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you both being here. Directors, questions? Director Rocha.
Thank you for your collaborative approach to addressing this. It's really appreciated, and I think it'll help with everything moving forward. What is your plan, Paul, to present updates to the board on the progress of the next steps identified in the report?
So certainly a formal update in that 90-day timeframe. And the reason 90 days, I mean, it's a long time, but getting chair and vice chair together and us providing updates to the Board of Supervisors and Water Resources Agency, I think what we've always talked about is doing the same to all three entities. So from a formal perspective, 90 days. Now, informally, if we come up with something in the next couple of weeks, I'll bring it up during staff reports at the next board meeting. Absolutely. I think we've been pretty good about just texting each other like, hey, we're going to say this, or we're going to do this. You want to show up or not show up? But formally every 90 days, informally every board meeting.
I think that's a good plan. I mean, really, sets of 3 months allows for updates to be of substance
Yes.
and a real update on the work that's been accomplished. So I think that's a good approach to it. No other questions.
Thank you.
Other questions? Vice Chair Williamson.
I guess I'm in regards to the first finding, I'm wondering how is it that we're in the audit, at least we're trying to rely on the formula that's an example in Exhibit J, when it's clear that there's an understanding from both agencies that there hasn't been an agreement upon the formula that we're going to use.
I'll certainly tell you my perspective on this is, yeah, the agreement doesn't say use this. It says you can use this or something else. It does say draft, so that, puts questions into thing. However, I think the way we work is we try to be professional and helpful. And we never asked, doesn't say we have to ask explicitly, but we never asked and we deviated from it. So the first couple of years we did use Exhibit J. And then we had change in personnel and that changed. So what R and I have discussed at least is, well, actually we differ in this one too, but I want to look at if we used Exhibit J, what would those 4 years have been? I mean, we know what GPP says, but with our inputs, and I think it is fair and reasonable to both our wastewater customers as well as Water Resources Agency as our customer to take a look at that because that's what we said we would do and sort of want to do what you say. One thing R had mentioned is like, well, another option is to look into the future. Like what formula would we use? And if it's good enough for us in the future, maybe it's good enough in the past. So it's another way to look at it. But and as I sit here, I don't know that when we put our inputs in, it's going to be any different. We may end up owing them more, or maybe it's far less. I don't know, and I think we need to go through that exercise to understand where it lies. I'm not sure if that's satisfactory to answer for you because you're basically saying, well, why would you do that? And it comes down to doing what we say we're going to do.
Absolutely. And it was a little bit rhetorical. I appreciate you answering the question, but a little bit rhetorical in that I hope that we can find a way of finding some common ground in that. It seems like there wasn't agreed upon. I mean, was the Exhibit J that was used initially, was that agreed upon, or was that just something that the agency, the M1W used as kind of default?
So this goes back to our history on it. So in 2014, 15, we were doing that 10% flat indirect charge. Question came up going, hey, is that valid? So we actually hired a consultant, Greg Klumpner with NBS on that one, right? And our CFO and finance manager at the time, for us, it was Tori Hanna. For Water Resources Agency, it was Kathy Palladini. We worked with this consultant to develop an indirect charge formula specific for this relationship. That was put into the agreement, the amended and restated water recycling agreement in 2015, and it was used for a few years by Tori Hanna, the then CFO. When she left, we had a new CFO come in, a different formula was used. And actually the formula that was used uses part of Exhibit J, and then where it gets complicated was simplified a little bit. So when I say it's still a valid formula, part of it's actually what's in the agreement, and part of it simplifies a very complex portion of that formula.
And then just
So back then it was collaborative as well, and how we got here.
And at some point, wasn't there like a joint board meeting and a presentation and?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we had that joint board meeting at the treatment plant in 15.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've had COVID for the last week and I have COVID foggy brain. And so I could be way off on this, just so you know. I remember it being in 15.
You know, and it is a somewhat of a unique challenge we have here. I think, you know, from the auditor's perspective, that was the formula that was there to be used, notwithstanding some of the descriptors around it. And so that's why they relied on it and, you know, absent some alternative. And so, yeah, we'll definitely sort through that. We'll make sure that we make the time to review their analysis and talk about some of the differences that Paul has raised in terms of, you know, the things that M1 thinks that should also have been considered that, you know, weren't. So.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then just one final question. Did anybody have awareness of any of these issues, particularly at the Water Resources Agency, prior to the issuance of the audit? Was it part of was there concerns that partially what led to the audit being conducted that we were trying to address, or we were just conducting the audit?
Yeah, leading up to the audit, there were queries back and forth between the two financial teams in terms of, the agency staff trying to understand how Monterey One was coming to certain conclusions or calculations. And it was sort of the irregularity of the responses or the inconsistency in the responses that really got the agency to the point where we thought, okay, let's initiate this financial audit, bring in a third party, and see what their opinions are. So there were several years leading up to this. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, other questions from the other side? All right, seeing none, I've articulated this before, I think, but I just want to state for the record that Vice Chair Williamson and I are committed to working with your chair and your vice chair to provide whatever, to meet with them and provide whatever reasonable guidance we can provide to staff, and also help staff and ourselves understand the dynamics of our respective boards in terms of getting to what's possible. We think that there should be some fair position, probably in the middle of things. We certainly need to work out the issues that our general manager has expressed. We probably need to come to agreement on what should be the inputs to whatever process going forward. So we need to learn the lesson from, on the one hand, years ago, having had an overly simplified way of calculating overhead costs, which were probably potentially way off from being fair to one party or another. And then the pendulum swung over to this appendix in the agreement, which I can't even understand, and I've got a degree in theoretical mathematics. So if I can't understand it, I can't expect anyone else in the room to be able to. Well, except maybe Director Rocha, I don't know. So we probably need to get to something a little bit simpler and a little more understandable and get to agreement on inputs. And of course, we need also to resolve the issue of the $1.1 million at some point. And I think we're committed to going there. And not only that, but learning whatever lessons there are to learn that have been pointed out by the auditor. And in that sense, the auditor's work, even though we don't completely agree with it, has pointed out some areas for improvement, and we need to make those improvements going forward. We're going to be having a new ERP system, and who knows, maybe your financial staff will at some point get some kind of access to our ERP system to be able to, in an automated way, obtain the information that they need going forward to keep your board appraised. So all of those are things that we hope we can work out. But they'll probably take a while and maybe more than 90 days. All right, any staff, any final recamas? Are we?
So the recommendation is just to receive the report and provide need directions on next steps. We laid out the next steps as long as those seem appropriate and the intervals coming back to this board. I think we're okay.
Anyone care to make a motion to that effect?
Public comment?
We can have it before or after. Do you want before?
I think it's usually good to have public comment
Okay.
before a motion.
Then we'll go out for public comment. Well, I don't want them to, you never know what the motion says, and they may want to may not like the motion, but at any rate, do it either way. We'll go out to the public. Anyone in the room wishing to comment on this issue? Anyone coming in on Zoom, if you would raise your Zoom hand if you wish to comment? Yeah, I'm not.
We have one inside here.
Yes, in the room. Mr. Chardevoin, please join us at the podium.
Good evening, everyone. I participated in the negotiation of the document that actually revised the charges. And the big issue was every type of expense was charged either 10% or 5% with no basis on it. And both the Water Resource Agency and Monterey One Water agreed we needed something more specific. And at that time, when we negotiated it, I was advised that the cost to water resources may go up. If we do the formula on a actual cost basis or an excuse me, an indirect cost basis. And I said, well, if that's the case, then that's fair. And we put the new charges in effect, and the cost to Water Resource Agency actually went up. And when the Pure Water Monterey came online, then the cost picture changed a little bit, and the cost to Water Resources actually went down. So the thing is I think the people that worked on the formula actually had a pretty good idea what was going to happen and how it was going to happen, et cetera. So it and kind of from the discussion, it kind of sounds like you know, the old adage of when you do a contract and you have a formula in it, you put it in as an example so that people can follow it. And so it's important to stick with that kind of discipline in handling contracts. So I'm going to be interested as this process goes on to see if you actually go back to the formula in Exhibit G and take a look and see how close that is to where everybody thought it was going to be. So anyway, that's the curiosity factor that I have. But I'd like to assure that there was some very arduous, detailed negotiations on how much different things were going to cost, what were indirect charges and what were direct charges, et cetera, as these formulas were put together. And the people that worked on them worked very hard to make sure that they had something as fair as possible. And so it's a great idea that you all are looking at this again at this juncture. And as I say, I'm going to be very interested to see what the final result is. Thank you. I'll answer any questions anybody has.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Probably a motion to receive. And,
Do we need a motion though? No, because I think it's direction, right?
I don't believe you need a motion. You're just receiving the report and providing direction.
yeah, probably a good idea. Yeah, thank you. No, so seeing no more public comment, we'll bring back to the board and heard from the board. Staff, do you have enough direction?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
All right,
very
we-
good. Very good. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Yes, thanks for being here, all right.
Indeed.
Appreciate it.
And you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. All right. We move on to agenda item 12B. Once again, we go back to staff.
Yes. Board Chair and members of the board, Bob Holden, Principal Engineer, here to talk about the interruptible incremental rates and fixed cost. This is a process I began back in 2013, and going to be given over to finance from now on. So exciting time. So in that time period, the board has approved rates in 2014, 2017, 2022, and then just repeated the rates in 2023. So this originally went to the Recycled Water Committee in May. It was pulled from coming to you at that point so that it could review the rates and the process with the Monterey County Water Resource Agency and the city of Salinas. So, okay. Special user rate. So that's established through ordinance, and it applies to all car washes, major hotels, big laundries, hospitals, and users who don't fit into any other category. So this is the cost for some, typically a commercial or industrial user, what they would pay for treatment. Showing the rates in fiscal year 2023 and for this fiscal year 2025. So they've increased. The reason they increase is, and they're not all the same, is because the water quality has been different back in 2022 for the 2023 fiscal year and last year. So the factors of total biochemical oxygen demand and total suspended solids are the two factors that are used in these calculations. And those have differed each year that we take samples. And so those just shows, these are the rates in dollars per acre foot that would be charged then for water that we cannot recycle. So next slide, please. Yeah, so the interruptible rate. So interruptible rate is a rate that can be water that can be interrupted. It doesn't have sewage in it. It has another legal source for treatment and disposal, and can be used for recycling at the SVRP or Advanced Water Purification Facility. So these show the rates, the last approved rates for fiscal year 23 and the proposed rates for 2024, 2025. So in this time period, the special user rates in general have gone up 38%. So the two items that stand out here are the Blanco Drain and the Salinas Pond 3. Both are actually quite a bit higher than previously because we've switched from basing these rates on estimates to actual costs. And the actual cost of pumping was quite a bit higher than we thought it would be. Next slide. Fixed costs also were previously based on estimates and currently are based on well, let's go to the specifics. Looking at the wreck ditch, costs have gone down. That's because the actual O&M costs are lower than the estimated cost had been. The Blanco Drain and Salinas Pond 3 are so close to equal that wasn't going to mention that. For the Salinas industrial wastewater, the fiscal year 23 was based on estimated $5,000 for a replacement account for the facilities. This year, we've taken all the cost of all the different facilities, construction costs, based on the year they were bid, and then expanded by inflation. So the Salinas industrial wastewater replacement now account is $117,000. So from 5,000 to 117, which is the difference in that fixed account. And then finally, the incremental rates. So incremental rates, these are rates related to backwash from the advanced water purification facility, Salinas Valley Reclamation Ditch, and the Salinas River diversion facilities. And so these are the values from the last time we had to what we're proposing at the lower one. Again, by ordinance, the amount has increased by 38% in this time frame. So just what the SRDF shows. The SVRP backwash is less increase due to reduced biochemical oxygen man suspended solids, whereas the AWPF backwash has increased a fair amount, again, because of increases in those, the strength of the backwash water, the BOD and suspended solids. So currently the methodology for determining these rates is now based on actual cost, and it's set up in a way that intending for the finance department to be able to do an annual update to be able to bring back to you. So I'm requesting that you would approve the recommended rates for the next fiscal year, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, directors? Yes, go ahead, Director Stefani.
We look at reclamation ditch and Blanco drain, those increased costs are gonna go to pure water Monterey.
Yes.
And the other ones are for CSIP when they do use the pond.
Usually. So, and I'm glad ours here. So for instance, the city of Salinas requested that we bring water from Pond 3 in. We're doing that now. We asked Water Resources, would you like that water for recycling? They said no. With the river running, they have plenty. So we could use it. So now we're using it and we are paying the interruptible rate. So normally you're absolutely right, Ron, is that would land at Water Resources Agency. This particular year, after they agreed to it, it's landing on us. And then, of course, when we don't use it, it'll land in Salinas paying that interruptible rate. But you're absolutely right. Normally, Reclamation Blanco go to Pure Water Monterey, and industrial wash water goes to Water Resources Agency.
Other questions? Okay, I do have a couple. I'm a little puzzled. Table 3A on page 149 is labeled fixed annual cost for interruptible source waters for fiscal year 25. Table 3B is the prior, I guess the prior 2 years, the rates remain the same. It's the total fixed costs in both cases. So the total fixed costs have gone down in fiscal year 25 compared to fiscal years 23 and 24.
No, so
Well,
If-
195,000 is less than 203,000 for Pond
For
3.
reclamation in Salinas Pond, the charges the fixed annual cost did go down.
correct.
Okay.
And that, Bob, I'm assuming that is primarily due to the replacement account and or O&M costs.
Yes,
Because
it
your
was
loan payments are fixed
mostly,
and insurance is pretty much
mostly
fixed.
O&M. The actual value there, $2,000, and the estimate was 73,000 the previous time. So considerably less O&M than than actual.
So, Tom, the ones in, for 23 were estimates as best as we could. And now that we have a couple years under our belt, we're using actuals. And that O&M cost estimate was incorrect.
Okay. So for 23, 24, we were charging this, but they were based on an estimate.
Correct.
Yes.
All right. So
So we're
for-
fine tuning it over time here.
We're fine tuning over time. So for the wreck ditch, it went down from the prior years to fiscal year 25. It decreased.
Mm-hmm.
Then it increased a bit for Blanco Drain, increased a whole lot for industrial wash water,
Right.
and then
Right, that-
decreased a little bit for Pond 3.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure
Yes.
that's all coming out of the calculations. Okay. And on page 148, talks about this 7%, but where does that 7% come from with respect to the special user fee?
Right. So in 2024, we did a even more detailed analysis, looking at every budget item within every treatment plant department, trying to identify whether the cost would increase with increases in flow, BOD, or suspended solids. Looking at, I think it was 7 different interest rates, one for chemicals, electrical power, natural gas, anyway, other things. And looked at the rates that we came up with compared to the special user rate. And we found that they were close to similar. Then we took out the pumping component of the way that we've been calculating them, and they came out almost exactly 7%, within a couple hundredths of percent. And so chose to use the 7% of the special user rate. Again, the special user rate is established by ordinance, and save just a huge amount of time, effort, and whatever, and it makes sense. And then we add the pumping factor back in with actual costs for pumping the water.
Okay. Thank you. And then last question, in table 2A, you give the incremental rates for backwash, but who's actually paying that incremental rate?
Currently, think no one, but it's, the idea is that, well, I guess the AWPF, the Department 58, Pure Water Monterey is paying for the AWPF backwash.
Okay, so the backwash water is, if you will, allocated to Pure Water Monterey. It doesn't go back to CSIP or any of the County Water Resources Agency projects.
So in the agreement, the Amended and Restated Water Recycling Agreement, it says plant water is at the discretion of Monterey One Water. So that is where it would normally land, is whoever's going to use it. Now, SRDF is a different beast that R and I do need to talk about because there are restrictions in that permit of where the water can go and where it can be used. So if we're using river water to backwash those filters, the basket filters, then they should keep track of it. Well, we should keep track of it for them to have it go back to the Salinas Basin, but then they would be charged the 165.73 for backwash water per acre foot. So as Bob mentioned, this is something we haven't really tracked over the histories of the project other than with AWPF backwashes. That's one of the details we need to work out.
And in terms of backwashes, do we have the necessary meters and technology to
We do now,
monitor how much
yes.
we're backwashing when we
Yeah, we didn't
backwash, et
used
cetera?
to.
We
It was
did.
estimated, but
It
now
was
we do.
estimated.
We've been adding a number of meters in the past few years.
Thank you, Ms. McNary, for making that. Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you very much for clarifying. Director Rubino.
Thank you. I have a question on the Blanco drain. There's in terms of fixed costs, is that mostly because of infrastructure and loans that we're trying to pay off for that 700,000?
Right.
Yes.
So, right. Over $500,000 just for the loan payment. So that's, yeah. And then another 200,000 for replacement account. Yes.
And then as far as, one more question, as far as the Pond 3, I know you were saying that it was based on estimates before.
Correct.
Are we ever going to see a breakdown of the actual costs to get to that number?
So if I may, Bob, because then you can go more granular if you'd like. On page 149 of the agenda, table 3A, for Pond 3, it does talk, it breaks down what the replacement account is. You know, we need to fund that replacement cost. So when the thing wears out, we can replace it. A small amount for insurance, and then O&M with the usage that we've had. So there's no loan component to that. So now, but if you're asking for, do you have a breakdown of the operations and maintenance for that $4,300 a year? I'm sure we have it somewhere. I don't know what it is. Is that what you're asking, Kent?
Yeah, as much detail as that's possible.
Yeah. I mean, it's right. We just had accounting. Yes. Just do a printout of all the expenses and just, yes, tally them all. And
So we have that information.
right. But again, that's
That is a small percentage.
for Pond 3. That's only, 4,000.
It's like 2% of the costs.
Yeah.
The majority of the cost is the replacement account that we're putting money away for when we need to replace those pumps or do anything else.
Gotcha.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. There are no other questions from directors. We'll go out to the public. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this? Seeing no one in the room, is there anyone on Zoom? All right, seeing none, we'll bring back to the board. Anyone care to make a motion?
I will, Your Honor.
Thank you very much.
Before I make the motion, I just want to comment that it was good to see that we followed up with our partners in this and took care of everything. So there wasn't a dispute tonight. So we appreciate that. I'll go ahead and move the recommended action.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Director Garcia Arizolo. We have a motion and a second.
Can we provide comment at this time, Chair?
Yes, please, Director Roche.
Yeah, I just had an opportunity to talk with our Public Works Director and who expressed that although none of us like to pay additional costs, these are all costs that we have to pay in order to treat the water, which is ultimately in the best interest of all of us. So sharing that from our Public Works Director.
Thank you, Director Rocha, for that. Appreciate it. All right. On a voice vote, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Please show unanimous. We move on to agenda item 12C, consider approval of Fourth Amendment to the employment agreement with General Manager Shuto. This was discussed. Anyone care to make a motion, unless we want to go to the public first, but the public hasn't heard anything.
Chair Moore, because this involves an executive compensation, I have to provide a verbal statement
Please.
before we do that.
Mr. Gilpin, go ahead.
The item before you includes a title change for the general manager from general manager to executive/general manager. It would involve a salary increase for a base salary to $353,358.72 and a discretionary bonus in the amount of $200,000. I mean, it's $20,000 annual discretionary bonus. Yeah. He's well worth it, but not that much. So, again, a $20,000 per year discretionary bonus, which is at the discretion of the board. These numbers are based on salary surveys conducted of general managers in the area and, is essentially a mean +5 criteria plus a 4% COLA, which is consistent with the increases we've provided to district staff on recent agenda items. So I'm happy to answer any questions on it.
Questions?
Just for clarification.
Director
the-
Rocha.
Sorry
Go ahead.
for not being recognized. Just for clarification, it's the title changes executive director/general manager. Correct?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Yeah.
I think it's executive officer/general manager.
What did I say?
You said executive.
Oh, executive officer/general manager. And Paul's got me all tongue tied tonight.
Yeah, I did that.
Without the 200,000.
That's what we.
So the point of this is to bring the general manager more or less in line with what we've agreed for our employees in the recent round of bargaining. Is that correct?
It is, and to get his salary consistent with his peers in our peer agency review based on the salary studies that we've done.
Yeah, he was what, number 10 of 12 towards the bottom.
Yes.
Right. And to be clear, the bonus is only achieved at the end of the year if specified goals are met by the agency and by the general manager.
Yeah, as written, the bonus is discretionary to be awarded by the board on the terms it should choose, and it is discretionary.
And something we're going to have to do very soon is set those goals, those
Correct.
specific goals. Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? All right, we'll go out to the public. Anyone in the room? Anyone on Zoom? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back. Is there a motion any director care to make?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you,
Second.
Director Church. Is there a second? Thank you, Director Garcia Arzola. All right, on a voice vote, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Once again, please show unanimous, and thank you very much. We move on to agenda item 13, staff reports. Mr. Shuto.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Actually, I have none, but I know we've had a lot of stuff going on at the plant lately that I assume you want to, or Jose wants to jump in
Right,
on.
I'm going to defer to Jose, so if he could come up and talk about a couple things that are going on. And while he's doing that, if I can have Chai put a picture on and I'll talk about the picture after Jose talks.
Good evening, Chair Moore and members of the board. I did provide an update at the Recycle Water Committee. We had a pretty significant project that our utilities and maintenance department undertook in changing out some very, I don't want to say dilapidated, but equipment original to the plant, part of our switch gear and a breaker, a transformer, I'm sorry. So the project was going along really well. We were anticipating finishing about 5 days ahead of schedule. Unfortunately, we ran into an unforeseen challenge that was
on the supplier side, they didn't do some proper programming on some of the gear. But overall, we still came in a day early. The plant ran well without any hiccups. We were relying on generator power and running disconnected from the grid for a while. So that went well. We do have a pretty significant shutdown coming up on the 4th. I believe it's next Wednesday, as part of the four-door rehab project on that bypass that goes into the headwork structure. They're going to be leak testing the temporary bypass HDPE piping this week. And then the purpose of the shutdown is to install a line stop to isolate the force main coming from the peninsula, the four-door interceptor. So those are the two big things coming up.
And then last night we were on island mode because PG&E had a repair that they worked on. So it was supposed to start at 4 o'clock and end at 3 in the morning. They didn't get started till after that, but we were back on regular power. But when that happens on island mode, you guys are aware that both recycling projects cannot be run. So AWPF nor SVRP were online. What I have up on the slide, I was honored to attend Tom Moore's retirement from the military as far as being a professor there for 23 years. And it was well attended, and Nick Smith also attended. That's his brother on the upper right hand that came from the East Coast to attend. And
The much younger brother?
the much younger looking brother. Yeah. And then up on the top left, they presented him with an award, and then Director Moore, he also gave a speech. It was a delightful afternoon, and you can tell they very much appreciated Tom Moore. And actually, Marina Coast was there. They kind of outdid Monterey One Water by a whole table. So, but anyway, our thoughts were with him, and we're excited for his milestone that he reached in life. So, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Question, was that a specially made tie?
Well, it was specially found by my wife many years ago in an airport bookstore somewhere along the line. But my other passion, of course, has something to do with that sport. But I do really very much appreciate Assistant General Manager McNary and Director Smith attending. I'm sorry Paul was not feeling well and unable to attend. I would have enjoyed it. But thank you very much for roasting and embarrassing me.
Do
All
we have
right.
more staff reports also?
Go ahead, Peter. I didn't mean to interrupt you here. Just a quick report to let the board know that we're working on a plan for using debt to fund future capital improvement projects. As you may recall, the budget that was approved in June included an assumption that the agency would raise about $30 million of debt over the next 2 years. So we've been working with our municipal finance advisors to get a sense of what our borrowing capacity is for the agency at this point and in the coming years, and what some of the options are for us. What are the various vehicles out there for raising debt financing? The current thinking is that we will probably want to do a public bond issuance in the near term and follow up any future financing using some of the state and federal vehicles that are out there. And that's primarily not so much because of rates, but as a function of how long it takes to put these things into place. So my hope is that in a month, when we come back and meet in September, we'll have something more concrete to present to the board and either seek guidance or actually maybe make some decisions. So that's.
Thank you.
Yes, good evening. board members. Again, Matt Thompson, Director of Engineering. Just a couple updates related to what Peter just mentioned. We've been rebooting our capital improvement program, and as part of that, we've been doing outreach to the engineering community because we anticipate we're going to have to bring in a lot of engineering firms to help us with preparation of plans and specifications to deliver these projects. And we recently advertised a project we call digester gas handling and heating improvements. This is one of the capital projects that was in the approved capital improvement program. And we had a really good response to it. We received proposals from 9 different engineering firms, which I'm enthusiastic about because it affirmed for me that Monterey One Water is the firm that these firms want to work for. So I'm hopeful we'll get really good quality engineering services. And then the second item is related to biosolids handling. We're coming up at the end of this calendar year. We are supposed to stop disposing as much biosolids into the neighboring regen landfill. And so we've been working to solicit services for hauling and disposal of that material, likely in a composting facility out of the county. But we recently learned that Regen Landfill is going to continue to receive up to about 25% of our historic biosolids tonnage, which is good because we could keep most of this material locally and at a slightly lesser cost. So thought that was a good news item to report. And that's all for me.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. So I had met with Felipe over at the landfill and discussed this and was quite pleased that the Regen board and their leadership was moving towards allowing us to continue to dispose at least a portion of our biosolids. And, what Matt and the team and Tammy and the team in terms of looking at our biosolids moving in the future and finding a long-term solution in conjunction with Regen, I think is what's best for this community. And that's what they're doing. And I very much appreciate that.
Any other staff reports?
Yep, we got one more from Government and Community Affairs. So it's been a busy month as we have worked to engage with our big picture community. So we had a tour with Soquel Creek Water District, who is getting ready to bring online their own advanced water purification facility for groundwater replenishment just north of us. As we mentioned at, I think it was Recycled Water, we also hosted some of our industry peers through CASA, the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. We have coming up Diablo Water coming for a visit. We have NPS coming for a visit. We have a group of undergrads from Stanford University coming for a visit. So lots going on in the space as we share what we do here at Monterey One Water with our industry peers. A group of us will also be headed down to Orange County to attend the Water Reuse California conference, where a number of us will be presenting on a range of topics related to water recycling. And then we are also working on scheduling, kind of piggybacking off of the theme you've heard tonight up here, working on scheduling a meeting with the US EPA as we explore additional funding opportunities, potentially through their WIFIA program. We also just put in the works a grant application, or we're starting the process of a grant application through Cal OES related to some cybersecurity efforts. Unfortunately, kind of to round this all out, we're really excited to share that we've brought on 2 new team members on the Government and Community Relations team that will help support together. They will support the Monterey Regional Stormwater Management Program and then other duties as assigned to our department, helping us get through everything we just shared. So we will bring them on site next month as we do further ledge updates. And so you can meet them in person.
All right. Thank you. Any others?
I think that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, staff. And we'll go to agenda item 14, board member comments. Any board member comments? Director Habino?
I'd like to welcome Director Shirley tonight, and just a shout out to Director Cronin that wish him the best, and he's in our thoughts and prayers.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments? So those of you who may or may not know that Director Urbino's under the weather, seriously.
Director Urbino is not.
I'm sorry.
Doing it.
Ragsdale Cronin. Thank you. And I think we ought to try and do something. I'm looking for ideas, a card at the very least. Any thoughts? But Director Shirley knows probably is closest to him. What do you think might be
You know,
appropriate?
yeah, I mean, I think a card would be nice. You know, this is a place that the Bill really loves. He oftentimes told me that this was the place he felt most comfortable, even more than the council. So I think he would love to hear from you. And I know his wife would appreciate that as well. So.
If I may, so we don't have the board taking any action, maybe staff can recommend that during closed session, we can see if we can have a card sent up that everyone can sign so we can get it to Bill as soon as tomorrow.
That would
If
be
that's
great.
appropriate.
That'd be great.
Is that okay, Chai? Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Chai is very prepared. I bet she's got an emergency card somewhere. All right. If there are no other board member comments or reports, we'll move on to agenda item 15, public comment in closed session. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters appearing on closed session may do so at this time. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes or less. Seeing no one in the room. Seeing no one on Zoom, we will go into closed session again. This is conference with legal counsel. Anticipated litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9, Bullings D, Bullings 2, one case.
It is 8:59. The board is adjourned from closed session. There's no reportable action, Chair Moore, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And we stand at agenda item 18, adjournment.